Imagine waking up at 4 in the morning in the middle of nowhere with a centurion screaming in Latin inches from your face. You're not a movie actor. You're a Roman soldier on active campaign. And the next 24 hours are going to destroy whatever romanticism you might have about what it means to serve in the most powerful Roman legion of antiquity. The life of a Roman soldier that books describe and the real life that historical documents reveal are two completely different things. Roman training, Roman discipline, the weight of Roman armor, Roman tactics that only make sense when you're at the center of the chaos. All of it carries a physical and psychological cost that very few people would be willing to pay. In this video, we're going to walk hour by hour through what your first 24 hours in Roman warfare would look like, based on Roman history documented by sources like Polybius, Vegetius, and Julius Caesar himself. You're going to want to run. And you're going to understand exactly why. It's 4 in the morning, and the sound of the buccina, a long curved bronze trumpet used by the Roman army, tears through the silence of the camp. There is no snooze button in the Roman legion. The signal sounds once, and the penalty for not being on your feet and ready within minutes is a collective beating administered by your own unit companions, a practice called fustuarium, which the historian Polybius described in disturbing detail in his writings from the 2nd century BC. You get up, the camp where you slept is not an improvised tent thrown up in the wilderness. The Roman army built the castra. Standardized military camps with protective ditches, wooden palisade walls, and internal streets laid out in an orthogonal grid. Every single time they stopped for more than a day. And you helped build this camp yesterday afternoon, after hours of marching. Your arms still ache from the digging. But that doesn't matter right now. The space where you sleep is called a contubernium, a group of exactly 8 men who share a tent, their equipment, and their food. These 7 men around you are, in practice, your war family. Your success and your survival depend on how well you function as a unit. A Roman soldier does not fight as an individual. He fights as part of a collective machine that was designed to be greater than the sum of its parts, and if one gear fails, the entire mechanism is compromised. You get up in the dark and begin putting on Roman armor. This process alone is, in and of itself, a test of endurance that most people never imagine. The lorica segmentata, the articulated iron plate armor that became the most recognizable visual symbol of the Roman legion, weighs between 15 and 20 pounds on its own, but it's only a fraction of what you'll be carrying today. Over the armor, you put on the bolteus, the leather belt with metal decorations that holds the gladius, the short, devastatingly efficient sword of Roman close combat, and the pugio, the backup dagger on the opposite side. You pick up the scutum, the curved rectangular shield made of laminated wood covered with treated leather and with a central boss of bronze or iron, which alone weighs between 11 and 13 pounds. You grab the 2 pila, the throwing spears with a wooden shaft and soft iron tip specifically designed to bend on impact, rendering useless any shield they embed themselves in. And then you pick up the pack. The pack. The Roman soldier's pack deserves a special moment of attention because it perfectly encapsulates the philosophy that made the Roman army so different from any other military force in antiquity. The Roman historian Frontinus, writing in the 1st century AD, documented how Roman soldiers were called Marius's mules, a reference to the Roman general Gaius Marius, who in the late 2nd century BC carried out one of the most radical military reforms in Roman history and turned each legionary into his own supply carrier. The logic was brutally pragmatic. An army that didn't depend on a massive separate supply caravan could move faster, react more quickly, and be less vulnerable to flank attacks. In practice, this meant that each Roman soldier on the march carried beyond the armor and Roman weapons we've already listed the following items: construction tools, including a dolabra, a multi-purpose pickaxe, and a shovel, wooden stakes for building the nightly camp, 3 days' worth of food supplies, an individual cooking pot, a change of clothes, a spoon, a canteen, and other survival items specific to the ongoing campaign. The total weight of a Roman legionary's complete kit on the march ranged between 55 and 88 pounds, depending on the type of campaign. To put that in perspective, a modern infantry soldier in combat carries between 48 and 100 pounds of equipment, and that's with composite material technologies, ergonomic frames, and decades of biomechanics research. The Roman soldier carried equivalent weight with iron, leather, and wood equipment in sandals. When you're fully geared up, you're carrying the equivalent weight of an average-sized adult distributed across your body, and you have to march with it. Soon, you'll understand in very concrete terms why so many men would have begged to run before the day was over. With all the Roman armor on your body and your full kit on your back, you join the formation in the dark. The Roman legion you're part of is made up of approximately 5,400 men divided into 10 cohorts. The first cohort of maximum prestige has 800 men, double the rest, and is where the most experienced and decorated Roman combat veterans are stationed. Cohorts 2 through 10 have around 480 men each. You're in the 6th cohort, made up of soldiers with intermediate experience. It's not the most dangerous position, but it's far from safe. Orders come cascading down through a hierarchy that operates with a precision that, in the 1st century AD, had no parallel in any other army of the ancient world. At the top is the Legatus Legionis, the overall commander, usually a Roman senator or member of the equestrian class assigned by the emperor or provincial governor. Below him, 6 military tribunes divide administrative and tactical responsibilities. Then the prefecti coordinate the auxiliary units integrated into the legion. And then we get to the true backbone of the institution, the 60 centurions, who command each centuria of 80 men with near absolute authority over the lives of the soldiers under their command. Your centurion's name is Marcus Petitius Rufus. You know this because he's already screamed his own name at you and the other men in your centuria enough times for it to be permanently burned into your memory. He carries a vitis, a vine staff that is the symbol of a centurion's authority, and doesn't hesitate to use it. Polybius recorded that centurions were selected not just for individual bravery, but for the ability to maintain Roman discipline in extreme situations, to remain impassive when others would panic, and to make fast, correct tactical decisions in the middle of chaos. Marcus Petitius Rufus was clearly chosen based on the right criteria. This morning's orders come in precise military language. The army is moving northeast. There's reconnaissance of enemy movement. Estimated march distance is 11 to 14 miles. The march formation is standard column with auxiliary cavalry on the flanks. Alert status is maximum. Scouts reported signs of enemy activity in the final hours of the night. The aquilifer, the standard bearer who carries the golden eagle of the legion, the most sacred symbol of the entire unit, passes in front of you during formation. The aquila is more than a metal object. In Roman military culture, the legion's eagle represented the collective honor of every man who served in that unit since its founding. In 53 BC, when General Crassus's legions were destroyed by the Parthians in the catastrophic Battle of Carrhae, the loss of the eagles was considered such a profound disgrace to the Roman Empire that it took decades of diplomatic and military effort to recover them. And their final recovery was celebrated with festivities and ceremonies on the level of the greatest military victories in Roman history. Emperor Augustus used the return of one of the Carrhae eagles as one of the most celebrated milestones of his reign. You watch the golden eagle as it passes, and for the first time since you entered the Roman army, you viscerally understand the weight of what it means to belong to this institution. It's not a feeling of grandeur. It's something heavier and more serious than that. It's the awareness that you are now part of something that is greater than you, that existed before you and that will continue to exist after you unless you or someone at your side makes a mistake that cannot be undone. The orders end. The march begins. The sun begins to rise as the Roman legion column moves out. 20 miles is the standard distance of a daily Roman army march, what the Romans themselves called the iter justum, the just march or proper march. On difficult terrain, in situations of strategic urgency, or when the commander needed to cover ground quickly, that distance could increase to 15 or 19 miles. The iter magnum. You'll cover every one of those miles with your full kit. The march cadence is controlled by the rhythm of the buccinae and drums that echo along the column. The Roman army didn't simply walk from one point to another. It marched in regulated step, maintaining column cohesion and ensuring that units arrived at their destination in adequate physical condition to fight immediately if necessary. A trained Roman legionary could maintain a speed of approximately 4.5 miles per hour under normal terrain and weather conditions. At forced pace, that could increase to 5.5 or 6. But sustained over hours, with full kit, each additional mile starts to weigh in a way that isn't just metaphorical. It's physical, it's cumulative, and it's relentless. Your feet are shod in caligae, the Roman army's military sandals, built with a thick sole of multiple layers of tanned leather, studded on the bottom with hobnails, carefully standardized metal tacks that increase durability and traction on different types of surface. Archaeological excavations at Roman frontier sites in Britannia, modern-day Great Britain, and in Germania have already recovered hundreds of pairs of these sandals in varying states of preservation, and the wear patterns they show are silent but eloquent witnesses to the amount of ground these men covered. Functional for dry, rocky terrain, caligae were considerably less comfortable on waterlogged ground or during rain. And Northern Europe, where the Roman army spent decades in continuous campaign, rarely offered ideal conditions. Water is rationed from the start of the march. You carry a leather canteen, but orders are clear. Drink only enough to keep functioning, not to fully quench your thirst. The Roman army's water supply on campaign depended on a combination of logistical planning and reconnaissance work. The legion's military engineers, known as immunes for being exempt from some general duties in exchange for their technical specialization, were responsible for identifying safe water sources along march routes before the main troops' arrival. In enemy territory, contaminating wells and rivers was a tactic of war used by both sides, and the scouts had reported that the region you're marching through was recently occupied by enemy forces. You don't know if the next source is clean. The march is not silent, far from it. Conversation between soldiers is prohibited on maximum alert, but there's the constant, incessant metallic noise of thousands of Roman suits of armor moving in unison, the rhythmic thud of feet and sandals on stone and packed earth, the heavy creaking of supply wagons and siege machines following the column, and the occasional shouts of centurions correcting someone's pace here, reprimanding someone who drifted out of formation there. On the flanks of the long column, riders from auxiliary cavalry units, non-Roman soldiers from allied provinces integrated into the Roman army as mounted combat specialists, continuously sweep the terrain for signs of ambush. You see them passing at speed on the flanks and think they have the best position in the whole formation, before remembering that they're the first ones to run into any ambush the scouts might have missed. At midday, the column stops. You have 15 minutes. 15 minutes to briefly sit, drink moderately from the canteen, chew on a piece of dried meat or a chunk of panis militaris, the hard, dense military bread, closer to a thick cracker than what we'd normally call bread, that made up a fundamental base of the Roman soldier's diet on campaign, and mentally reorganize what's left. Your legs burn with a specific kind of pain that comes from hours of continuous walking under heavy weight. Your shoulders are partially numb from so long under the equipment straps. You're genuinely hungry for the first time today, and the 15 minutes are up before you finish eating. The march resumes. When the Roman legion finally stops to make camp in the late afternoon, the work doesn't end with arrival. It starts all over again. Building a Castra Romanum is a collective engineering operation that would be impressive in any era of human history, but becomes truly staggering when you consider the context. It's carried out by men who just completed a 12 to 14-mile march with nearly 90 pounds on their backs in a matter of a few hours, with the sun still in the sky, and repeated almost every night during an active campaign that could last months or years. The process begins while the column is still arriving at the chosen site. A group of specialists, the legion's military surveyors and topographers, called mensores and grammatici, arrives ahead of time and plants colored standards in the ground, marking out the complete camp layout before the main troop arrives. The design is always identical. Rectangular, with standardized proportions, two main streets crossing at right angles in the center, the Cardo Maximus running north-south and the Decumanus Maximus running east-west, with the Praetorium, the commander's tent, always positioned at the strategic center. The absolute standardization was a deliberate and intelligent choice. In an army that recruited men from dozens of different provinces, speaking different languages and with different military customs, ensuring that any Roman soldier knew exactly where his unit would camp before even seeing the terrain was a huge logistical and psychological advantage. You receive your dolabra, the multi-purpose pickaxe you carried throughout the entire march, and that until now was just more weight on your back. And you begin. The immediate task is digging the perimeter ditch. The standard specification documented by Polybius and confirmed by extensive archaeological excavations was a trench approximately 10 feet wide by 6 feet deep, surrounding the entire camp perimeter. The excavated earth is not simply discarded. It is carefully piled on the inner side of the trench to create the agger, an elevated terrace on which the sharpened wooden stakes that each soldier carried during the march will be driven in at an angle. The final result of this combination of ditch and stake wall is a defensive structure that can turn an open field into a position that would require a significantly larger force than the garrison to take by frontal assault. Julius Caesar, who was both an extraordinary general and a skilled writer, described in detail in his Commentari de Bello Gallico how Roman legions built these camps with a speed and precision that literally astonished the leaders of the peoples who opposed Rome. In 52 BC, during the siege of Alesia in the territory of present-day central France, Caesar ordered his legions, already months into campaign and who would soon themselves be besieged by a relief Gallic army, to build 2 complete circles of walls and ditches, one surrounding the hill of Alesia to keep Vercingetorix's forces trapped inside, and a second circle facing outward to protect the Roman army itself from the approaching Gallic relief army. In total, approximately 22 miles of defensive structures, built in a matter of weeks by exhausted soldiers who knew that a vastly larger enemy army was on its way. You dig. Your arms, which were already seriously fatigued from the march, now burn with a different and sharper kind of muscle pain. The afternoon sun presses down on the Roman armor you still haven't removed, because the protocol on high alert prohibits removing armor until the camp perimeter is complete and the sentries are at their posts. Centurion Marcus Petitius Rufus walks slowly along the excavation line, watching progress with eyes that lost any sympathy for others' suffering long ago, and taps the vites on the back of any man who shows signs of slowing down. Not with gratuitous brutality, you notice, but with the cold efficiency of someone who has built enough camps to know that a 30-minute delay in completing the perimeter can cost lives if the enemy shows up on the horizon. When the ditch is complete and the stakes are in place, comes the setting up of tents at the positions marked by the standards. Then the installation of guard posts at the camp's four gates, the Porta Praetoria facing the enemy, the Porta Decumana facing the rear, and the Principalis Dextra and Sinistra gates on the flanks. Then the division of overnight watch shifts, which will be 4 3-hour periods each, called Vigiliae, with each contubernium of the legion taking responsibility for at least one shift. Only after all of this is organized can you, finally, think about eating. The Roman soldier's meal on campaign was functional above all other characteristics. The pulse, a thick porridge of ground wheat seasoned with salt and sometimes enriched with olives, herbs, small pieces of cheese or dried meat, was the cornerstone of the field diet. Each legionary received a daily ration of about 28 ounces of wheat that he himself had to grind with a small portable mill and cook. The ration also included olive oil, vinegar, and salt. It was caloric, nutritious for the extreme physical demands of Roman service, and completely lacking in any gastronomic appeal. You eat in silence, with your 7 contubernium companions, around a small controlled fire to avoid creating a visual marker for enemy scouts in the surrounding hills. It's almost 6 in the evening. You're exhausted in ways you didn't know were possible. And the day still isn't over. Even on days of heavy marching, followed by camp construction, the Roman soldiers' routine included some form of training, not as punishment, as maintenance. Roman training was notoriously the most rigorous and systematic of any army in the ancient world, and possibly of any army until the modern era. Vegetius, the Roman military writer and theorist of the 4th century AD, documented in his treatise Epitome Rei Militaris, which continued to be read and studied by European military strategists until the 18th century, that Roman army recruits went through months of intense physical conditioning before they even touched real combat weapons. Running on varied terrain, jumping over obstacles, swimming in running water, horseback riding, all of it was part of the physical foundation a legionary needed to have before starting combat training. Weapons work began with the rudis, a solid wooden sword weighing approximately twice as much as a real sword, and a wooden post fixed in the ground called a palus, which served as a target for practicing combat techniques. Recruits were explicitly taught to execute direct thrusts rather than wide slashing blows. The instruction had a solid logical basis. The Roman gladius was a weapon designed to pierce, not to slash. A direct forward thrust is cinematically less dramatic than a wide slash, but it's faster, consumes substantially less energy, exposes the arm for less time, and is dramatically more effective against opponents wearing armor or holding shields. Roman legions spent centuries refining this technical approach, and it became an inseparable part of the Roman close combat tactics that made legionaries so lethal even when numerically outnumbered. This afternoon, after camp construction, the centurion orders 30 minutes of formation practice in Testudo, the famous tortoise you've already heard mentioned in documents about Roman history. In the Testudo, soldiers in the front row raise their shields forward, forming a wall. Those in the side rows project their shields to the sides, and the men in the center and rear rows raise their shields above their heads at angles that create a continuous, overlapping cover of reinforced metal and leather, capable of withstanding arrows, darts, and projectiles launched from considerable heights. The formation isn't just a defensive pose, it's an assault machine that allows the unit to advance toward an enemy position under heavy fire without suffering significant casualties. What no visual representation of the Testudo adequately captures is the level of physical coordination it demands. Every man needs to know exactly the position and angle of his shield in relation to the man in front, behind, and beside him. A gap of 18 inches anywhere in the formation is enough to let through an arrow or an enemy pilum. You drill the formation repeatedly until the movements begin to happen before conscious thought can process them. Sweat runs down the Roman armor you still haven't taken off. Your shoulders throb with each raise of the scutum. The man to your left, a veteran of campaigns in Dacia named Quintus Fabius, who arrived in your centuria 3 months ago after serving in another legion for 8 years, adjusts your shield angle without a word, just with a precise, firm push on your elbow. That kind of non-verbal communication, accumulated over weeks of training and living together, is exactly what distinguishes a high-efficiency Roman combat unit from a crowd of armed men on the same side. Training ends with practice of the pila, the throwing spears that are a fundamental part of Roman weapons. Each legionary normally carried 2, a heavier one, about 4.5 pounds, designed to be thrown at 50 to 60 yards at the start of an engagement to disrupt the enemy formation before the physical clash of lines, and a lighter one for secondary use in case the first had no effect. The ingenious design of the pilum, with a soft metal shaft that intentionally bends on impact, ensured that even if the projectile didn't wound the opponent, it would lodge itself in the enemy's shield with its weight, and the angle of deformation making removal nearly impossible in real battle time, forcing the warrior to abandon the compromised shield and advance without protection into the clash with the Roman line. Titus Livius, Plutarch, and Caesar himself describe battles in which this tactical maneuver with the pila completely transformed the dynamics of the confrontation in the first 15 seconds. You throw against a straw and wood target until the centurion ends the exercise. It's almost 7 in the evening. You're operating at the limit of what your body considers possible, and you've only been at this for 15 hours. The scouts return to camp when the sun is already low, and what they bring changes the mood of the entire Roman legion within minutes. The enemy army is camped less than 6 miles away. It is well rested. It is in possibly superior numbers, and reconnaissance signs suggest it will move at dawn, which means the battle is happening tomorrow morning, likely just a few hours after the sun appears on the horizon. The news spreads through the legion at a speed no official order can control or suppress. You watch the faces of the men around you change in subtle but unmistakable ways. It's not simply fear, although fear is certainly present, visible in the eyes of some of the youngest and in the slightly quickened movements of others. It's a more complex emotional composition than that, a mixture of anticipation, of practical resolve, and a kind of tense quietness that only develops in people who have been through this before and survived. The veterans go noticeably silent. The younger ones start talking compulsively about everything except what's on everyone's mind. The psychological preparation for Roman combat had specific, carefully established rituals. The legion's priests, the haruspices, specialists in reading auguries, performed sacrifices and announced the predictions for the following day. This process shouldn't be dismissed as pure superstition. It was a social technology that served precise, practical functions. When the augury was favorable, soldiers went into combat with reinforced confidence, with the feeling that forces beyond the human world were on their side. When it was unfavorable, the commander had a mechanism that allowed him to postpone combat without it appearing like hesitation or weakness. The gods had spoken, and even the bravest men understood that. Emperor Augustus, whose careful efforts at consolidating and stabilizing the Roman Empire are extensively documented, was notoriously meticulous about military rituals, in part because he understood with great precision their strategic value for the troops' collective morale. The most experienced men in Roman combat in your cohort begin checking their equipment with renewed and systematic attention. Every joint and articulation of the Roman armor is tested with finger pressure. The straps are adjusted and checked again. The edge of the gladius is slowly and carefully drawn across a whetstone with movements that feel almost meditative. The scutum receives a fresh, careful application of beeswax to the leather surfaces to waterproof it against the heavy night dew, because a waterlogged shield will weigh more and weaken where the leather is glued to the wood. These preparations are as much psychological as they are functional. They're the way a Roman soldier finds to organize his thoughts and establish a sense of control over the situation before trying to rest. You watch Quintus Fabius as he sharpens his sword. After a long silence, you ask him what it's like. He sets down the stone and looks at you for a moment that feels longer than it probably is. "It's loud," he says. "Way louder than you can imagine before you're in it. And it stinks." He picks the stone back up and continues the slow movement over the metal. That's all he says. Night falls. The watch shifts begin. You get the second vigilia, 2 hours of patrol along the camp's inner wall, in the dark, with visibility of just a few yards beyond the stakes. The step is slow and deliberate, with regular intervals of pausing to listen to the terrain outside. Sentries are not to make unnecessary noise, but they must be sufficiently visible to deter opportunistic attacks from enemy scouts trying to probe the defenses or eliminate isolated sentries. The penalty for falling asleep on guard duty in the Roman army was not an entry in your disciplinary record or a financial penalty. It was fustuarium, the collective beating administered by your own unit companions that Polybius described in detail that clearly disturbed him as a researcher. No one fell asleep on guard duty. You don't fall asleep. When your vigilia ends, you have maybe 4 hours before the buccina sounds. You lie down in the tent with the gladius less than a hand's width from your right hand, the shield positioned to be grabbed within seconds. Sleep doesn't come easy. You lie there staring at the top of the tent in the dark, listening to the breathing of the 6 other men around you and the distant sound of sentry footsteps on the perimeter, and you think about things you'd rather not think about. 24 hours. That's exactly how long it took to transform any remaining romanticism about life as a Roman soldier into a concrete and permanent understanding of what it really meant to serve in the Roman legion. The most efficient, most disciplined, and most enduring military institution the ancient world ever produced. Popular Roman history, the kind told in movies, TV series, and surface-level documentaries, is almost always the history of the generals, the decisive battles, the emperors, and the speeches before the formations ahead of the grand engagements. It's a real history, but it's the history of the visible surface. The history that lives beneath it. The history of the everyday Roman soldier, the man who woke up before sunrise, carried 90 pounds for 12 miles, built a fortress with his own hands after the march, trained with Roman weapons until collapse, waited in the dark with the gladius within reach, survived the deafening chaos of Roman combat, and then still had to clean the field and pull night guard duty. That history is the real foundation on which the Roman Empire was built and sustained. For centuries, Roman discipline wasn't a philosophical abstraction. It was a collective survival system that worked because every man within it understood, in a visceral and daily way, that his life depended on group cohesion just as much as on any individual skill he might have. If this video made you see Roman warfare, the Roman army, and what it really meant to be a Roman soldier with different eyes, drop a like. Every interaction means a lot to help this channel keep bringing Roman history from angles that are rarely explored. Subscribe so you don't miss the next video. And let me know in the comments, which of these parts of the 24 hours do you think would be the hardest to endure? The march with 90 pounds, building the camp after the march, the wait in the night before the battle, or the first seconds of actual Roman combat? I have a theory about what the most common answer would be, and I'm curious to see if you can surprise me.